talking Christmas traditions this morning, getting to the root of some of the things that we quite often take for granted. It's been fascinating to hear when you analyse for the Americans a Christmas cracker or Christmas pudding. It sounds really eccentric. There is one man who probably knows more about Christmas than everyone else, apart from Santa, of course. Jonathan Green, BBC Wiltshire's very own Mr. Christmas, because he's author of Christmas Explained, and joins me now. Where to start? Well, let's start with the puddings, Jonathan, because hearing it analysed for BBC America there, it sounds kind of crazy. It's boiled, it's doused in alcohol, it's left for months, it's boiled again, it's doused in more alcohol. How far back does the Christmas pudding tradition go?
I suppose it really started in medieval times when people ate something called frumenty, which is like a spicy porridge. But it sort of developed through Tudor times, and they added all sorts of things. Part of the reason why we call mince pies is because they used to have literally minced meat in them, including things like hare's livers, and the Christmas pudding contained a similar ingredient. So I suppose Henry VIII might have been enjoying some of that sort of spicy, meaty porridge on Christmas Day. But eventually they started cooking it inside a pig's intestine first, just like we cook sausages now.
Right.
And that's one way that the pudding developed. But then in others, probably the most traditional version is the one which was enjoyed by the pudding king himself, George I. And that's the kind of cannonball one that was wrapped in muslin cloth and left to boil that way.
And incredibly decadent, even going far back as the Tudors there. I mean, it was basically full of expensive things, because presumably meat would have been a treat.
Yes, but actually the most expensive thing were the spices. We take it for granted now when you open your spice cupboard, but those are the things that would have come probably the furthest distance from like the Middle East and would be literally worth more than their weight in gold.
What about the coin in the middle? Where did putting a coin in a Christmas pudding come from?
Well, that really started not in the Christmas pudding, but in a version of the Christmas cake called the 12th cake. And that was used as the final celebration on 12th night itself. So at the end of the Christmas period, people would enjoy this, and they'd put a dried pea or a bean inside the cake. And whoever got that slice was then king or queen for the rest of the evening, whether they be the head of the household or a servant. And
I like that.
Festivities.
Oh, yeah. That's good. So
and that gradually graduated to become the silver sixpence inside the pudding instead, as the sort of 12th cake tradition died off and became Christmas cake.
What we could do then to bring back some of that is, if you do still put a coin or charm in the Christmas pudding, whoever gets it should be king for the rest of the day.
Definitely.
Yeah. They rule the TV remote for the rest of the afternoon. I'm going to bring that back. Now, other things that we all just take for granted, but we never really question: kissing under the mistletoe?
Yes, that goes back to the Vikings, to the north, as do so many of our Christmas traditions actually involving evergreens. But the kissing under the mistletoe bit is in the legend of Balder, who was the god of light and son of Freya, the goddess of love. She basically went through some big rigmarole to keep him protected, and the only thing she didn't get protection from was the mistletoe. And he was eventually killed by an arrow made from mistletoe wood. So after this, she burst into tears, and her tears were transformed into the pearly white berries of the mistletoe, and she proceeded to kiss everyone who passed underneath the oak tree where the plant grew, instructing them that whenever they met beneath the mistletoe, they should kiss one another in peace, rather than do each other harm.
Oh, that's a fantastic story. So, kissing under the mistletoe, if you do that this festive season, you are carrying out a Norse Viking tradition. That's amazing. Now, some of the things that were mentioned in the American Guide to Britting Up Your Christmas,
right,
I don't associate really with ancient traditions. I mean, Brussels sprouts were mentioned. I mean, can we trace that to being a traditional part of Christmas dinner?
Yes, because it's an unusual vegetable in that it comes into season during the winter in Northern Europe. And of course, generally for most people for a long time, only until the last century or so, you could only eat what you could grow locally. So Brussels sprouts were the things which were actually available at that time of year, which is why they became part of the meal.
Just, they're in season, they're prevalent,
exactly.
Let's stick them on the plate. What about Boxing Day? I mean, it's something that we all have our own routine for, but we never really query why it's called that.
Well, it's got nothing to do with boxing itself. It goes back to in some ways it goes back to medieval times, but it actually goes back to possibly Roman times. But the idea is that on Christmas Day, people going to church would donate alms, a donation to the box, which were placed in church, and the next day they'd be distributed to the poor. So they became known as the dole of the Christmas box, which in time they became the Christmas box. And the idea that you give anybody who serves you in any way during the year a little gift the day after Christmas. So like the milkman and the postman, like people leave cards and money for them now.
Yeah.
But the actual boxes were brought over by the Romans, again to distribute money to the poor, and they're often made from clay with a slit in the top, so they're possibly the first piggy banks as well.
You've written a book about this. Do you have a favourite Christmas fact, Jonathan?
I've got a couple. The first artificial Christmas trees were made from goose feathers dyed green, so the practice has been going on for a long time.
That's a lot of trouble to go to, isn't it?
It is.
Easier to just grow a tree, but there you go.
Probably. Yeah. But I also discovered about snowmen, because you think, well, people always make snowmen, but when did that begin? And the earliest illustration of a snowman is found in the margin of one of the pages of a book of hours from 1380.
1380?
Yeah, but they probably date back about 10,000 years, in truth.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Jonathan Green, for your Christmas facts. Jonathan Green's book, Christmas Explained, Robins, Kings and Sprouts, is published by, who else? Snow Books.